Nō mai, haere mai, welcome. I'm Bruce Munro. With me is International Relations Specialist, Professor Robert Patman, and this is Global Insight. Dozens of complaints have been made to the Human Rights Commission following New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters telling Green Party Chinese Kiwi MP Xu-Nan to go back to his own country. Is this a Kiwi backyard squabble, or are there international threads attached to this ugly little incident? Welcome, Robert.
Rena, Bruce, thank you.
New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has called the comments racist, but has said that they were made by Winston Peters as his party's leader rather than as New Zealand's foreign minister. Is that how it will be interpreted by the world's diplomats and political leaders?
In a word, no. Mr. Luxon has made a distinction which makes sense in domestic politics. But we live in an interconnected world, and we've already seen that the international audience does not view those comments with much enthusiasm. We had formal representations from the Chinese government, and the Chinese ambassador to New Zealand made the telling comment that those comments reflect more on the person who made them than the person they were directed at, or words to that effect. The other thing is that I think that our standing amongst other liberal democracies will diminish further. We didn't speak up over things like Mr. Trump threatening Canada. We haven't spoken up over Mr. Trump's ambitions in Greenland. Denmark and Canada are liberal democracies, and they will see this as yet another step of New Zealand moving away. I mean, traditionally, New Zealand has prided itself on its inclusive and diverse approach to democratic governance, and these comments seem to fly in the face of it. I think the problem for Mr. Luxon also is that he seems to be, in the eyes of other leaders, walking away from his responsibilities. Prime ministers in liberal democracies are ultimately, the buck stops with them when it comes to foreign policy or other policy areas, whereas he seems to be just passing the buck to Mr. Peters and saying that he's made racist comments, but he's done it purely in a domestic context. For the reasons we've just gone through, I don't think that will go over well.
New Zealand's gearing up for an election, and Peters presents himself in the populist mould globally. Where is he getting his inspiration?
Yes, Mr. Peters is not a newcomer to making anti-migrant noises. He's done this periodically since founding New Zealand First. And in the mid-90s, for example, I think he spoke about the prospect of an Asian invasion of New Zealand. I think the big difference, though, between 2026 and the mid-90s is the fact that Mr. Peters may feel in the Trump era he has more license to go further. And these comments he made went much further than anything he's ever said before, I think.
What do Peters' words tell us about this government's approach to foreign affairs?
Well, just before I answer that, Bruce, can I go back to the other part of your question, which was where does he get the global inspiration for this, or the inspiration? Well, there's domestic roots to Mr. Peters' approach. That is, it's not new. But we've seen the international rise of populism in the 21st century. And I think Mr. Peters, where does he get inspiration from and encouragement from? He's a close friend of Nigel Farage of the Reform Party. I think Mr. Peters went over to Britain to help campaign for Brexit in 2016. He's also, I think, quite an admirer of Mr. Trump's style of leadership. And certainly if you look at New Zealand First language, Mr. Peters shares the anti-woke sentiments of organisations led by the current Republican Party, Mr. Trump's party, and also Nigel Farage's Reform Party. Both use such language. So, and Mr. Peters, these comments are supposed to rally the nationalist sentiments behind him. But yeah, I think it's a combination of domestic, the appeal to those on the right of the political spectrum in New Zealand politics, but also capitalising on the fact that with the rise of populism, this sort of polarising language has actually expanded. And I think he's seeking to maximise the impact of New Zealand First in that context.
And what do Peters' words tell us about this government's approach to foreign affairs?
Well, it tells us several things. Firstly, it tells us that the arithmetic challenge of keeping the coalition government triumphs over principles. We've had the Prime Minister saying that this was unacceptable racist language, but he basically hasn't taken the action to either demand a full apology from Mr. Peters. That was an option he had. He could have demanded that Mr. Peters make a public apology in Parliament. And he hasn't. Instead, he's said he's regretted the action. He's had a conversation with him. He's criticised it and condemned it. But he hasn't gone beyond that. And people like Helen Clark, for example, who had experience of working with Mr. Peters when Mr. Peters was Foreign Minister, said it was his remarks were an invitation to sacking, in her words. So he hasn't gone down that route. That's Mr. Luxon. But I think he's going to pay a big price for fudging this issue. After all, had the government fallen apart because Mr. Peters was sacked for iterating that remark, many people would have blamed Mr. Peters. So, it's not necessarily, I think in short, there's been, Mr. Luxon has been politically hurt by this episode in not taking decisive action. It probably reinforces the image of him in the eyes of some and his critics as being weak. So I think the messaging of the government is contradiction. And I think there's been a reputational hit as a result. So I think one of the problems that this government has is that when it came in, it said it was going to stand up for New Zealand values and interests. And yet, we've seen through this episode involving Mr. Peters that this government is very much concerned with survival. And that may have explained why it's taken a softly approach, an approach of accommodation towards the Trump administration, which is assaulting the core values of this country. When I talk, what are these core values? Support for the rule of law internationally, and also multilateralism. These have been cornerstones of New Zealand's foreign policy in the post-45 period. And unfortunately, this episode reinforces the view that the government is not standing up for New Zealand values and seems to be incoherent. What we're seeing here is diplomatic incoherence. And again, I think that's going to have quite serious consequences for us in the world.
The US Democrat Party seems to be undergoing some change right at the moment. What could that mean for how our government should interact with the US?
Well, I think the US, I think we're referring to the result last night for the Michigan primary for the Senate, in which Dr. Abdul El-Sayed prevailed against Haley Stevens. This has sent shockwaves through the Democratic establishment, the major opposition party in the United States. And of course, we're facing the prospect of midterm elections. We should explain that Haley Stevens had about $60 million of backing, and 30 million of that came from a pro-Israeli lobby called AIPAC and its affiliates. In fact, Israel, or the AIPAC, have spent more trying to support Miss Stevens than any other previous contest they've been involved in. So this is, this shows also, as well as being a triumph for Abdul El-Sayed, it's also, I think, an indicator of how far American politics is shifting on the relationship with Israel. This has not been a one-off. We've seen a steady stream of pro-left anti-war candidates prevail in primaries. And we also saw, of course, Mandami win Zoran Mandami win the mayoralty in New York. And that has inspired other people to come from. So we're, as you can imagine, this has been received with some consternation by moderate Democrats, because they believe that this surge of the left, progressive candidates, will jeopardise their chances in the midterm. The progressive wing have none of that. They're saying, no, your moderate tactics played into Trump's hands, and that's why we lost the 24 election. So there's a genuine conflict of ideas now about the way forward, and this is likely to play out in the midterms, and that may even help the Republicans. So it's argued. What's the importance of this for New Zealand? I think it highlights the dangers of the last 2 years, where we've very much linked our foreign policy to trying to please Mr. Trump and accommodate him and be constructive with him. And the danger is that policy alienates many Americans who do not agree with Mr. Trump. So we actually have to strike a much more balanced foreign policy. And I think this is another indication that we need to have a foreign policy reset or foreign policy rethink. Of course we can have very friendly relations with the Trump administration, but that doesn't mean that we take actions such as not speaking up on human rights issues in Gaza or Iran, which would be noted by Americans who are not friendly to the Trump administration. In other words, we do have to stand by our principles to win credibility with Americans that do not support Trump. In other words, it has to be a nuanced policy that can work with Trump on issues where there's genuine convergence of interests, but also diverges from Trump on those issues that matter to Kiwis and also may matter to many Americans who oppose the Trump administration.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Ka kite anō.